Hello there guys, how are you doing? Welcome as always back to Rule of Two Review. Today we're going to discuss a little bit more of Nintendo, the Wii U, the Switch, third-party games, all sorts of fun stuff. So a few days ago there was an interesting situation where on Reddit there was a conversation happening with some of the guys from Sledgehammer Games, who we all know are developing the brand new Call of Duty World War II. And through that conversation, there was a question asked by a user to Sledgehammer Games about the Nintendo Switch version of the game, or basically if there will ever be a Nintendo Switch version of Call of Duty World War II, and the straight up simple answer was one word, and it was no, that is not happening. And, you know, it's kind of one of those things that's furthering the situation with third parties and the Switch. Since E3, there's been a large conversation about what's happening there and the fact that there was a very, very small showing of any third-party companies and third-party titles for the Nintendo Switch at the Spotlight or at other conferences and whatnot. There was a few, to be fair. It wasn't completely barren, but nothing like what we were expecting. And it's been discussed by myself the last few weeks and a lot of other people on YouTube and all over the internet about what's happening there. And once this happened with the Call of Duty thing, it was like, you know, the millionth time it had been confirmed, basically, by Activision and Sledgehammer that Call of Duty will not be on the Switch. It's been, you know, just another fine example of the fact that we really are in a situation, yet again, with Nintendo currently, where we're not necessarily seeing the third-party content that we'd like to. Now, I've made enough videos, and enough other people on YouTube have made enough videos talking about where we are currently and the fact that we're not seeing a lot of the third-party games, the Call of Duties and whatnot. And, you know, the examples I always bring up, Destiny and Overwatch and stuff like that, we're not seeing those games on the Switch, and that sucks. So I'm not really going to go over that stuff anymore, but I did want to have a discussion. I mentioned this on a video recently, and a lot of people said you wanted me to dive into this topic a little bit more. There is a conversation about whether or not Nintendo's prior console, the Wii U, might have somehow impacted what's happening right now with Nintendo's new console, the Switch, and the fact that after this E3 we maybe didn't see a lot of the third-party games coming that we wanted to, and maybe our expectations should be tempered quite a bit. So the real question here, obviously, is whether or not the Wii U, the console itself, and the sales of the unit, as well as the sales of third-party games on that console, might have affected what's happening right now with Nintendo and with the Switch and with these third-party companies. And I feel like the quick answer, without getting too deep into it, is overall, yes, I do think that that is probably true. And it's a sad thing to realize, especially as somebody who really enjoys the Wii U. I think it's a great console, and obviously there was a lot of problems with it, but I do enjoy it. But if you really kind of look at the history and the way the whole Wii U life cycle played out and the whole last 5 or 6 years of Nintendo in general, you start to realize that there's probably a lot of factors that lead into why we're not yet seeing a lot of these third-party games on the Switch. And I think that the Wii U's life cycle is probably one of, if not the biggest component to why that's happening. The good news is, my personal opinion and just my guess and theory for the future, is I think that it's temporary. I'm willing to bet if this Switch continues to be as successful as it is, which I think it will continue that success, we're going to start to see some level of pretty decent third-party support. It may take a couple of years, as I discussed on a recent video, but I think it's going to come eventually. So I don't know that it's a completely hopeless future. I don't think that all hope is lost and we shouldn't have any faith in some of these third-party games coming to the console eventually. But I do think it's going to be a little bit, and obviously we're seeing proof of that now with E3 and the rest of the year, the lineup for the rest of the year. We're seeing proof of that. The Wii U is an interesting case because it did start off so strongly, strongly with third-party support. And a lot of us know this, but I'll retread some of it here because it's interesting and gives us context for the whole situation with Nintendo and the Switch currently. You know, the Wii U launched, and third-party support seemed fairly significant. It was pretty exciting, you know. There was Assassin's Creed, there was Call of Duty, there was, you know, Ubisoft was supporting with Zombie U, of course, which was an exclusive, mature third-party IP to the Wii U, to Nintendo console. Really, really crazy stuff. We saw Mass Effect, we saw EA Sports games, you know, Need for Speed and Madden and stuff like that. It was interesting. It was like, wow, okay, so they are trying to do some things. THQ was on board, of course, with Darksiders 2. I didn't even prepare a list, but within the first year, there was a pretty significant amount of third-party support. Capcom even brought Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate to the console, which is a great port and something that myself and my friends spent a lot of time playing, probably almost a full year when that first came out. So, you know, things started off pretty strong, and it seemed like a lot of the third-party companies were trying to bring a semi-decent amount of their content that was releasing on the 360 and PS3 at the time to the Wii U. And what's interesting is we saw two of the biggest franchises in the industry have two solid attempts on the console before things started to change. And that would be Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty. We saw literally Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and Call of Duty Ghosts, those two consecutive games, release on the Wii U. They were both great ports that I enjoyed and played a lot of. Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which is considered by many to be the best Assassin's Creed game. I tried them both, did not like either one, but it's a huge series. It's very popular. And again, Black Flag specifically is widely regarded as the best Assassin's Creed game. That came to the Wii U. And none of those games really sold all that well, which is definitely a shame. Ubisoft, of course, we know, tried to continue support. They released Watch Dogs, the first Watch Dogs on the Wii U. We know that that's a messy scenario with how it played out, but they did release that game. I own it. I was very vocal at the time. Rule of Two Review was very new, but I was spending a lot of my time talking about Watch Dogs and the Wii U version because I was very excited for it. And I got the game on the Wii U, and I actually think it's great. It's a really good game. I can't compare it to the other versions, but I thought visually it looked great. I thought that the quality of the port overall was fantastic. It ran very well, very smoothly. It was a fun game. I enjoyed the game. The biggest problem is it was delayed, didn't make sense why it came out 6 months later, and they absolutely missed a huge opportunity with the gamepad. So there's many factors as to why that version flopped, but it did actually turn out to be a quality game. I just wanted to throw that out there. Splinter Cell Blacklist, I think, was the game, also released by Ubisoft. A really great port of that game. I thought the game was kind of disappointing, but they made a good port, and again, the gamepad was fantastic on that one. Rayman Legends, I mean, at this point, I'm just naming games. The point is, there were a lot, in the first 2 years, a lot of third-party games, third-party companies bringing some of their games over to the Wii U. The big thing that happened is none of them really sold that well. And by the time the end of 2014 and the beginning of 2015 was coming around, we started to realize, wow, we're not seeing any more third-party games. Like, what's going on? And these companies started to really kind of abandon Nintendo and abandon the Wii U. And it was a really hard thing to see, especially as someone who, even though I owned all three consoles and I loved them all, I wanted to play a lot of these games on my Wii U. I wanted to see if they could incorporate the gamepad. I wanted to support Nintendo and support these companies being successful on Nintendo. And I sure did try, man. I bought so many third-party games that I could on the Wii U. But, you know, there's other reasons that lead into them selling poorly, and I should address those really quickly. The biggest one is a lot of times they weren't releasing day and date, like I made that case with Watch Dogs. And a lot of times, they were not quality ports. Darksiders 2 and Mass Effect 3 come to mind, where they weren't up to par with the other versions on the previous gen systems, the 360 and PS3. I mean, they're kind of the same gen and kind of previous gen. That's sort of messy when you get into that territory, but you know what I'm saying. Like, they were running a lot better on the other systems, the competing boxes, and you get instances where Mass Effect, you know, very famously, the trilogy came out for $60. All three games for $60 came out around the same time. The one game, Mass Effect 3, came out on the Wii U. Not only is it not a good value money-wise, because you're paying the same price for one game as opposed to three, but we also only get the third of a trilogy. We're only getting, people who are playing on the Wii U and Nintendo consoles, we're only getting the final game of a trilogy. That's like if you told someone the only Star Wars movie you can watch is Return of the Jedi. Well, what the hell happened before all this? Like, really important stuff, and you don't even know because you can only watch the final chapter or read the last chapter of a book. It doesn't make sense, and yeah, Mass Effect kind of gives you a reason to get caught up, but it's not the same as playing those games, and those games were predicated on taking your Shepard character, making your decisions, and those decisions carrying throughout all three games, and the little comic thing in the beginning doesn't really get the job done. So anyways, I mean, that's kind of the quick, you know, dirty version of the third-party situation on the Wii U, and once they started to not sell for all of these different reasons, Nintendo gamers don't play a lot of third-party games, or so they think. The ports weren't very good. We were getting the versions not at the same time. They were really broken and buggy, and frame rates were crappy. All these different things. These games didn't sell, and third parties abandoned Nintendo, and they abandoned the Wii U. Now we come to the days of the Switch. We come to the launch of this newest console. Nintendo started to make promises of third-party support. They showed us that famous infographic with all of these developers who say they're on board for the Switch. Very exciting stuff. Even right now, I'm still excited about that, and I think we're going to start to see the fruits of that down the road. And of course, they launched the console, and they launched with like the greatest game in the last 10 years, Breath of the Wild. And it seems like it's mostly Nintendo first-party stuff leading into E3, and everyone's like, okay, well, the Switch is great. It's selling well. The console's fantastic. Breath of the Wild is like the best game ever made. And everyone was like, okay, well, you know, this is great for now, and we now believed that the future was going to be much brighter. When E3 came and went, and again, I discussed this, so I'm trying not to retread too much ground, but E3 came and went, and I think they had an amazing show. The best presents. They dropped the biggest bombs of the show, and it was really great, and we should all feel great about Nintendo. They showed an amazing lineup of first-party software throughout the rest of the year, and a couple of third-party games that are kind of exciting, to be fair. And that's fantastic. But we did all notice the lack of true third-party support. We didn't see a lot of these other big games that we wanted to expect. The Shadow of Mordor, the Destiny 2, and all these things. Why aren't games like these coming to the Switch? And now we start to realize and pick apart the hole in Nintendo's business model and what's really leading to this happening. And it's why when you look at the whole third-party situation that I just laid out for the Wii U, it's impossible. I think personally, I think it's very hard, if not impossible, to recognize that the way the Wii U situation with third-party companies played out is why a lot of them are very hesitant to jump on board with the Switch again. I'm sure that we're seeing a situation where, just like going from the GameCube to the Wii, we're doing the same thing with the Wii U to the Switch, where they had to play the wait-and-see game. The GameCube was an amazing machine. It's my second favorite console of all time, but obviously third parties, despite strong third-party support, they did okay in the GameCube, but not as well. We really saw Sony and Xbox start to really make a rise and a huge push there, whereas Nintendo kind of stayed flat with first-party stuff. That was a huge shifting point, I think, for the whole industry. I think today's industry, personally, I believe this, was shaped by that 6th generation PS2, GameCube, Xbox era. I think that shaped a lot of what we're dealing with right now. And so Nintendo brought out the Wii, and everyone was like, well, this is weird, but also kind of awesome. And the third-party companies didn't have much to show in the beginning, but then when the Wii sold like crazy, they scrambled to start bringing unique versions of their games, their multi-platform games, to the console. And I think that the Wii had a pretty weak lineup overall, but it did have some amazing, some of the best first-party games that Nintendo's ever made, as well as a couple of absolute gems of third-party titles, absolutely. And I think that similar things are happening right now, where the Wii U didn't do so hot on the third-party front, and now the Switch comes out, and third-party companies are like, yeah, we're waiting, we're gonna just wait. We're not really into that now. But all of a sudden, the Switch is selling really fantastically, and it's a big hit, and it's taken the world by storm, and it's branching into all these different brand new gamers, just like the Wii did. And I'm sure that we're gonna see a situation where these third-party companies throughout the next couple of years will start to jump back on board. But there's no doubt that their hesitation stems from the fact that the Wii U, as much as I love the console, didn't sell well, and third-party games did not perform. I mean, I don't know any third-party games that surpassed 1 million units. I mean, Hyrule Warriors did by cheating, because it's a first and a third-party game. And I do think, you know, Bayonetta made it to 1 million, and that's really great. But that game had to have such a specific, huge push from Nintendo. And it's not a multi-platform game, it's an exclusive game, which is great. I mean, I prefer those. But I think that what a lot of us and a lot of what the third parties wanted to see was that Nintendo could bring out an HD console that was supposed to match what Sony and Microsoft were doing, but still have a unique spin with the controller. And the Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creeds and the Ubisoft IPs and all these different games could sell over 1 million and could sell really, really well on Nintendo's new HD console. And that never happened, even though I think that both Nintendo and the third-party industry have a lot of blame to share in that happening. It still set the precedence, I think, for them to say, well, you know, we're going to wait and see. We just have to wait and see. And I think it's kind of silly. I think that, you know, again, I discussed this. I think that Nintendo should have worked really hard leading into the launch of the Switch to really say, what do we need to do to make it so you will want to release your game early on? We don't want to have to prove ourselves. Like, we believe in it, but we don't want to have to prove ourselves. We just want you to see an advantage of a new market of gamers to sell to. And I think these companies should have said, wow, we have a new market of gamers to sell to. And this console could possibly reach a lot of other people in different ways. And it would be really fun to bring our game to a console that plays on a TV and is also portable. There's all these reasons for everyone to see what's happening there. It really would have been nice if Nintendo and the third-party industry worked together to make the Switch successful on this front earlier on, as opposed to being hands-off like I think they're doing right now. And we have just a couple of companies dipping their toes in the Nintendo Switch waters, like with FIFA and with Rocket League and stuff like that. And again, I think it's really unfortunate, and these companies are making huge mistakes because they are part of the reason a lot of these third-party games didn't do well on the Wii U. They brought out, in a lot of cases, in most cases, more than half of the third-party games were bad ports. Whether it was because the value was crummy, like with Mass Effect 3, or whether they were buggy and broken, like with Darksiders, Assassin's Creed, and also Mass Effect, and Splinter Cell, Blacklist, and all this stuff. Like, a lot of them, they didn't really perform the way they wanted, and I think that it's absolutely obscenely offensive for a company to release a crummy version of a game like that and expect it to sell and gauge an entire market's interest based on that. Yeah, we weren't interested in your games, but not because we aren't interested in your games. We're not interested in broken games and throwing our money away. And a lot of us, a lot of people, Nintendo gamers and gamers alike, have multiple consoles. If Assassin's Creed comes out on console A and runs like crap, but Assassin's Creed on console B runs fantastically, that's where most people are going to put their money. That's just common sense. It's just good business and good decision making. And that's all that happened. We made good decisions by not buying your crappy ports in the Wii U. You made poor decisions by putting a crappy version of your game on that console and expecting us to just flock to it just because the Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty name was on it. And I shouldn't say Call of Duty, because I will actually defend those versions. They were good ports that didn't sell for, I don't really know why. I mean, there was a small community on those games, and I interacted with them quite a bit because I loved them. But, you know, I don't really know why they didn't sell. It's really too bad, because they were both very good ports. With, you know, the other situation, it is what it is. Nintendo didn't make it enticing. Nintendo made a weak console. Nintendo didn't entice them to bring their quality games over, and these companies made shoddy ports and expected them to sell. It was just a toxic relationship that was bred for disaster. Like, it was never going to work out. And so for all those reasons, I do think, in wrapping up here, that when we look at the Switch situation, and we've yet to see the third-party support a lot of us wanted, a lot of us expected and deserved and demanded, and that Nintendo kind of sort of promised, even though it was a little bit of a lie early on, you know, I think that they're just playing the wait-and-see game because the Wii U situation played out the way it did. You know, and blame aside, because we can put some blame on Nintendo, some blame on the third parties, and I think that all arguments are fair there. It is what it is. But I'm going to leave you with the positive message I mentioned earlier in this video. I think it'll change. I think the fortunes of the third-party situation on Switch will improve because the Switch is going to keep selling, man. It's a great piece of hardware. There are great first-party games that are going to keep people buying them. Even though they're not third-party games they're buying them for, people will still buy Switches because Nintendo was very smart and knew how to bide the time and make room for the Switch to be successful and for their amazing software to come out and entice people to buy it. And the third-party companies will see there are so many people buying Switches, and we keep asking for them on Twitter and on Reddit posts and all this stuff, bring your game to the Switch. Eventually, the wall will be broken down. And what's tough is, you'd like to think, oh, the wall will be broken down, so next year we'll see these games. Well, doubtful, because I think they're going to only start deciding to make some of these games by next year. So I'm thinking it's 2019 we'll start to see a more significant, robust third-party support for some of these games on the Switch. And that's for the games that can run. We're not going to see Anthem on the Switch. I think a lot of third-party games could run on the Switch, but some of them we can't. We're not going to see a game like Anthem running. Battlefield, I don't really know. Call of Duty should be coming, and that's a whole different mess, obviously, but you know, that's what it is. I'm going to wrap this up here because I could keep going on, and I don't want to do that. I think that, yeah, we can probably say a lot of what happened with the Wii U affected the Switch, but I think the future will be bright. No matter what, there's going to be games to play on our Switch, whether they're Nintendo's or other companies. Right now, there's so much to be excited for. The Switch is a great piece of hardware. It's fun to play games on it, and that's what matters the most. So I'm sad to not have these third-party companies on board yet, but I believe they're coming, and until then, I'm happy to play all of these other amazing games that make me want to turn my Switch on and play it and enjoy it and love it. So that's the way I see things. Tell me what you guys think. What do you think when you compare the Wii U situation to the Switch? Do you think that it did affect what's going on there and these companies are waiting for that reason? Or do you think that maybe there isn't much truth to that and they're just who knows what other reasons you might think we're not yet seeing these games on the Nintendo Switch? Tell me what you guys think about this whole crazy mess below. Thanks as always for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.